Hey guys, welcome to my Fire Mage guide for patch 11.0. Sorry. I'll try to keep it short, sweet, but it's probably gonna be pretty long, right? I have a checklist here to go through some stuff, so let's break it down. So talents. Obviously, like I'm not gonna put like every single talent point that different talent setups. You can find stuff on logs, but this is our general single target talent page. Notice here we're taking Master of Flame instead of Heat Shimmer. Heat Shimmer might sim like 0.1% better single target, but obviously Master of Flame is better in AoE. Yeah, so just play Master of Flame all the time. Um, for AoE you have like two different setups. There is like the regular M plus setup, which was like flame striking like option. It's this. This point here in Heat Shimmer can go Master Flame, or it can go anywhere else. I like Master Flame usually. But yeah. Um, I actually don't know why it's not on Master Flame. But yeah, anyway. And then there's also like the Living Bomb setup is gaining some sort of popularity. It's okay. I kind of like it. Yeah, it's this. But I'm going to be mostly focused on single target stuff. In terms of AoE, I guess it's worth mentioning, you want to Flame Strike at like 5 targets and above. At 4 targets it's equal, but obviously if it's equal then just go for the pyro damage. So just do it at 5. In terms of general talent strengths, obviously you can find this in a sim, but SKB is slightly behind in Unleashed Inferno. I would say it's about like 3-4% ish based on the sims. In terms of weak talent points, basically anything Living Bomb is like not worth taking at all in any situation unless you go all the way down here. These two talents is really what makes Living Bomb like more potent, I suppose. If you're only specking these three, it's just not worth it, or even these four. It's just not worth it. In terms of what we can drop from our current page here, I would say the weakest points are pyrotechnics. But if you remove pyrotechnics, you can only take one of these three, which are just worse. Maybe there's some like juice with fire starter that's like undiscovered. Heat shimmer, as I already talked about. Master of Flame, obviously you can remove, and lastly wildfire. These points are like the most flexible ones. Everything else is kind of locked in, and you can't really change it. In terms of healer talents, obviously Sun Fury, Savor the Moment, and Radiomancy. Ignite the Future is getting buffed in 1.05 patch, which is going to come out most likely October 22nd or the week before. But yeah. Anyway, what about rotation? So when we talk about the rotation, it's very simple. We're going to break it down in a couple of steps, but generally the gameplay goes as follows. You're in one of 3 stages. You're either in Combust, or you're in Filler, and if you're in Filler, you're either just in like regular Filler, or you're in Hypothermia. So we're kind of going to break it down like that. Fire is a lot easier now compared to before, like significantly easier. So the way we play is very simple. In our Combust, we're going to follow a very strict priority sequence, and we do not change the sequence based off of like duration left in Combust or GCD left in Combust and stuff like that, like we did in the past with SKB. Main reason why it's just not worth it to play around those GCDs and stuff is because nowadays, like when you look at how many like different sources of random procs you get between like time anomaly, you get CDR from the ashes, you get procs from burden of power and glorious incandescence. There's just like you just have way too much chance to just proc a bunch of random fire blasts, in which case sitting on fire blasts or not completely depleting your fire blast as the top priority is just bad, right? Even including like when you talk about like, oh, if I have 2 GCDs left, do I want to IB PF, IB Pyro, and then PF Pyro, or do I want to PF Pyro? I don't know. It's weird. Like, basically, just keep it simple. This is what I'm trying to get at. So what is the rotation? In Combust, there's 2 versions depending on whether you play Heat Shimmer or not. Since I said you shouldn't play Heat Shimmer for most cases, it's like the simpler version of just use your IBs first. Once you run out of IBs, you use your PFs. Once you run out of PFs, use your Scorches. Obviously, if you're doing PFs and you get IBs, go back to IB, right? So you're just going to be like IB Pyro, IB Pyro, IB Pyro, IB Pyro, and then when you run out, it's like PF Pyro, PF Pyro, and then maybe you get an IB, and then it goes back to IB Pyro, and then you run out of IBs, use up all your PFs, and then maybe down when you're down horrendous, you use Scorches. Yeah. Part of this also means that leading up to combusts, we want to start pooling our IBs. Pooling refers to not using all of them. So typically what I like to say is I like to go into combust with about 2 IB charges. Try not to go in with any less. More is fine, but don't sit there capped on IB. Also, it's worth noting that if you have a hot streak and combust cooldown is like 3 seconds or less remaining, then you actually want to hold that hot streak for combust. So for example, like, you're just like fireballing. Like, let's say you have a PF, right? And you're fireballing, and then your combust is 3 seconds. You can IB, but then just don't spend the hot streak until your combust is ready, So you're just banking the hot streak. Only 3 seconds, don't do that too much earlier, right? But yeah, if you do end up playing Heat Shimmer, then our rotation gets a bit more complicated. Because when you play Heat Shimmer, you have like an extra spell you need to start worrying about, namely Heat Shimmer, right? So if you play Heat Shimmer, the rotation becomes like, or the priorities becomes IB, and then you want to talk about like Empowered PF, which is the PF from Phoenix Reborn proc, and then it's Heat Shimmer, and like improved Scorch maintenance, and then it's regular PFs, and then it's Scorch. Why do we have separation in empowered PFs and PFs here? Well, because, like, if you don't play Heat Shimmer, then obviously this stuff is gone, so the PFs just become the same thing, right? I guess it's worth noting that, like, technically this should be like IB. Oh, I can't change it, but it should be like IB improved Scorch refreshing PF Scorch. Improved Scorch refreshing is only like when you have like 1 second left on it or something like that, right? Like 1 or 2 seconds. You don't want to like refresh it too early. In fact, if you ignore improved Scorch completely, it's not even that huge of a loss. So, yeah. Biggest thing I would kind of like really caution against is make sure you don't cast too many Scorches. Scorch does absolutely no fucking damage. If I show you, I'm just gonna PF one time, and I'm gonna Scorch one time. Yeah. I mean, obviously Scorch didn't crit, but if Scorch crits, 50k compared to 270k. When you're in Combust, obviously these damage buffs, so like these damage spells are increased by 60%, but that makes the difference even bigger, right? Like, so yeah, Scorch really bad. Try not to cast Scorch unless you have to. Yeah, so that's our rotation. So just to recap, IB, PF, Scorch is your Priorless in Combust, and obviously if you need to refresh Improved Scorch, you do it there. So just to give you like a quick example on the dummy, like let me just like get like a hot streak or something heating up. So I'm gonna fireball precast, and then I'm just gonna use all my IBs. I'm out of IBs, so I'm gonna PF, and then I'm gonna go back to IB, and I'm gonna PF, back to IB, then I'm gonna PF, get back to IB because I got a bunch, and then yeah, and then we're in Hypothermia. Okay, so what is Hypothermia and how do we play around Hypothermia? Do we ever IB in Hypothermia? Do we ever Fireball in Hypothermia? What if you get Combust in Hypothermia? So, the idea is basically, there is effectively 2 different ways you can do it with IB at least. For those unaware what Hypothermia does, Hypothermia makes Pyroblast just instant cast. It's not necessarily like making it a hot streak pyro, but it's at least making it instant cast. Why is that different? Because hot streak increases the ignite damage of Pyroblast by 100%. But yeah, pyro, instant. So do we want to IB? The question is, or the answer is, sorry, if you're about to reach 3 charges of your Fire Blasts, like you're going to overcap, then you want to spend an IB so you don't overcap, right? The amount of IB that you want to spend though is just 1, and you want to make sure obviously that you only press it when you have heating up. Now it's important to note, if you have like heating up but you have a spell in the air, right? You have heating up but you just fired a pyro and it hasn't landed yet, you have hot streak, right? Like you just need to wait for your pyro to land and you'll have hot streak. But you want to like keep that in mind, right? So you only want to do it pretty much when you have heating up, or you just fired like a hot streak pyro or whatever, because then that hot streak pyro will land and give you heating up. The other alternative is you can press it to refresh your Feel the Burn when it's almost expired during Hypothermia. Once again, only do that when you have like only heating up, and importantly, only do that 1 time in Hypothermia. I can go on long-winded explanation as to why it matters that you only do it 1 time if you're going to do that method. Effectively, to say if you press IB 1 time only during Hypothermia, you're not actually wasting the heating up or the Fire Blast, because you're basically just pushing your state 1 forward. Instead of ending with heating up, you'll end with hot streak, and instead of ending with hot streak, you'll end with heating up. But once you press it twice, then you kind of like started to waste an instant cast pyro. But yeah, that's heating up. What about IB? What about Fireball? Sorry, what about Combust? So if you have Combust available when you get Hypothermia, Like let's say you got hypothermia, combust is like 2 seconds remaining cooldown, and then it obviously comes off cooldown. Then it sounds weird, but you actually want to fireball precast before you combust still, even though hypothermia is active. You don't want to just press combust and throw out a pyro. Now granted, it's not a huge DPS loss to do that, but still, yeah. So still fireball during your hypothermia if you're gonna go into your combust. Yes, scorch is worse because scorch does 0 damage. Okay. Now what about our other kind of filler, right? The non-hyperthermia filler. Our filler is actually much nicer and much smoother now this time around. The way you play your filler is simply just, you want to kind of think of your guaranteed crit spells as in pairs. So you only cast a guaranteed crit spell when you have another one to pair with it. But effectively, you want to always just use all your instant cast spells, your guaranteed crit spells, before you start casting your fireball. So like you exit your hypothermia after you combust, and then you're just gonna like PFIB Pyro, PFIB Pyro, like just if you get one crit, obviously you'll just be PF only. Once you've run out of your PFs, that's when you start fireballing. Okay? One nuance on top of this is if you PFIB, let's say, and that was your last PF, then you want to do Fireball Pyro, not just Pyro by itself. Okay? So yeah, use your instant casts first before you go what's the word I'm looking for? Like, going back to your Fireballs, basically. Yeah. And like I said, just Fireball for your before your Pyro if you also want, if it's like your last PF that you just used. Yeah, so like right now, PFIB, one hot streak, yeah, Fireball Pyro. Okay, well, perfect timing, thank you game. Sometimes you'll get random procs of Combustion. When that happens, it's gonna feel awkward and it'll feel weird, but your Combustion Pyro is actually the exact same as your regular Combust. The only exception to this is if you have Combustion off cooldown or it's about to come off cooldown, then try to bank your IBs a little bit. Don't spend your IBs unless you're going to cap. The reason for this is because spells cast in Combust reduce the cooldown of Combust, and obviously IBs off GCD, which means we can fit more spells in. But if your Combust is off cooldown, there's like a sense of wasted value, right? So we want to start holding our IBs a little bit in our TA Combust, Time Anomaly Combusts, if Combust is off cooldown. If it's not off cooldown, just let it rip, yeah? Cool. So that's our filler. To give an example of what it might look like let's say we're going to our combust, right? Let me just go do a combust real fast. So we're just gonna IB Pyro, use up all our IBs, PFs, kind of like rounding this out. Back to PF because I'm out of IBs. Oh look, I have an IB. Hey, cool. That last IB maybe was a mistake, but we'll see. So yeah, we're doing our hypothermia, and then yeah, just PFIB Pyro, PF, PF, Pyro, PFIB Pyro, PF, Pyro. Oh look, hypothermia. I'm just gonna spam. I'm not. Oh, okay. I'm about to cap up, so I'm gonna use one IB. Back to pyroing, right? PFIB, pyro. Now my combustion's starting to get close. Maybe I start thinking about pooling now, right? So I'm gonna start to like chill out. I actually should have held that hot streak. That was a mistake. I haven't gotten used to that yet. But yeah, you get the idea. It goes pretty fast. Like your combust comes off cooldown very quickly. Now you'll also notice I didn't shifting power here. Is that intended? What do we use shifting power for? The idea with shifting power is simply we want to use it where we don't waste cooldown of anything. So the current sim rule is you want to use it when you have basically like one or less charges of PF and IB, or combust is 20 seconds or less cooldown regarding to PF. Personally, I'll be honest, I don't pay attention to that 20-second or less thing. I just kind of like just shifting power when PF and IB are one or less charges. Seems to work out fine, but yeah, worth mentioning. Very simple, just don't waste cooldown. Shifting power gives you about 17 seconds of combust CDR. That 17 seconds comes from the fact that shifting power is 12-second CDR, plus 3-second channel time, plus you're going to IB one time, which is with kindling another 1 second, and you're going to obviously precast before you combust. So you're talking about 12 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1. So 17. Okay? So if your combust is 17 seconds or lower, probably don't cast your 7 seconds fine. 16 seconds or lower, don't cast shifting power because you're going to start wasting combust cooldown. If it's 1 second and you really want, if it's like 16, 15 seconds and you really want a shifting, just send it. It's not a big deal. But just know officially, technically, you want to do it at like 16 seconds or more. Or 17 seconds or more, sorry. So yeah, that's shifting power. What about execute? What do we do in execute? As I kind of already mentioned, in your combustion, you'll want to refresh your improved scorch debuff only in the last second or two in combust, and you only do this instead of or above PF. If you have IBs, keep ripping IBs. Don't stress the scorch. In general, refreshing execute is a lot less important than it used to be in the past, just because of the fact that Scorch just does fucking awful damage, like really, really bad damage. So, spending time to cast a Scorch and Combust is like borderline not worth it. It is worth it, but like it almost isn't kind of deal. But yeah. Outside of that, in your filler, you don't really pay attention to your like execute improved Scorch debuff, but most of the time you will be casting and maintaining the execute debuff just from playing the game. I'm just pressing the buttons that you have, and you're gonna end up scorching at some point anyway. If you really, really want to, casting a scorch here and there just to maintain your improved scorch debuff is not a DPS loss. It's like technically not really a gain either. But if you want to do it, go ahead. If you don't want to, it's fine. Yeah, do with that what you will. What does it mean here, self-lust? So, there's this weird, funny thing with time anomaly. With current design, the way time anomaly works is you cannot proc a spell that you already have active. So if you have combust active, you cannot proc a combust. If you have 3 charges of IB, I actually don't know if that's true for IB, but at least for time warp as well. If you have time warp active, you cannot proc a time warp, right? How does the spell actually work? So you roll a dice at any moment, like the tooltip says, and you roll yes or no. If you roll yes, then you roll another dice, where it chooses which of the viable options you can roll. So let's say you have no combust, no time warp, and you roll the dice and you hit yes, then it will roll a second dice to say, am I going to give you combust, IB, or time warp? Now, if you have combust active, and you won the first dice roll, then obviously your only two choices with the second dice roll is time warp or fire blast. The weird part is that it really is just time warp. It's not bloodlust or anything like that. Right? So if you have time warp, the Mage lust, you cannot proc time warp. But if you have bloodlust or heroism or aspect of the ancients, whatever the hell the evoker thing is called, rage of the ancients, some shit, then you can proc time warp, which is like double lust, right? Now, is this good or bad? Does it matter? The answer is yes, it does matter. You ideally want to be the person that lusts. Because you don't really want double lust, you actually want combust procs as much as possible. So by eliminating the opportunity to proc time warp, you're more likely to proc combust effectively on that second dice roll. Okay? Now, I will say, this is not a huge deal. It's like 1% DPS. I don't know the actual number, but it's pretty small. So don't be that guy who's yelling at your party, stop lusting, I need to lust. And like, if it's literally just you or some other guy presses it in the same second, yeah, you should be the one that does it. But it doesn't mean that like you should screw over your group just so you're the guy who's lusting. Okay, just keep that in mind. Cool. Yeah. So that's our self-lust. What about AoE? The interesting thing is you have Flame Strike, you have Living Bomb stuff as well, and you have Ignite. And the really nice thing about Fire right now is you can actually get pretty cheaply Flame Strike. So if you look at the like Flame Strike build that I showed earlier, all I'm really losing single target is Pyrotechnics, which as I said before is like one of our weakest points, and Master of Flame, which I mean, arguably I should be playing this, or at least I like to play this. Yeah, it's like pretty. You're just losing Ashen Feather and Molten Fury and Pyrotechnics. All these three combined is like you're losing 3-4% single target DPS, but you're gaining like 2-3 really strong AoE points. So it's pretty easy to actually have this kind of like hybrid build going on where you can swap between Flame Strike and Pyroblast whenever you want. And like I said, it's about 5 targets that you want to start Flame Striking. As for this talent, honestly, I don't play around it too much. The cast time is like nice, but the main point that you take it for is the like damage increase. What I like to do is to just kind of switch it up in my combustion, where I'm trying to cast like PF IB alternating. So it'll be like PF Flame Strike IB Flame Strike. So I'm using 2 Flame Strikes in between. But if you're towards the end of your combustion, just start slamming your IBs also. Yeah, don't hold on to these too much. But yeah, the main part of this is actually the damage for your, in your combust. Yeah, that's that AoE. the living bomb playstyle doesn't really change too much. You just basically don't have Ashen or this thing Majesty of the Phoenix, so you don't even need to worry about it. It's just a single target rotation, and you just press Flame Strike at a number of targets, right? 5 plus. Cool. And living bomb is completely passive. It's not an active spell anymore. Awesome. Let's see. Is there anything else? Stats. I guess the correct answer is what stat do I play? What do I do? Blah blah blah. I have 26% haste and 13% crit, 12% mastery, 623. If you ask me this, I will block you. Just sim your character, and that's how you do find out what your best stat is. You just go to top gear, nothing crazy. You just go to top gear, and you put in your items, and you just like, oh, is this good? 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 I don't know. Is this? And then you press top gear, right? Spoiler alert: haste is very, very good. Haste is our best stat. Mastery tends to be our second best stat. Verse tends to be our third best stat. Crit tends to be our worst stat. This can change depending on your gear. I find it very unlikely that haste is not your best stat with just the current design. But whether you want mastery or verse or crit just depends on your gear. If you have 0 crit and 17,000 mastery, crit might be better than mastery. Our worst stat might become your second best stat. Just depends on your gear. Most likely haste is going to be the best though at all times, like I was saying. Trinkets, get a Spy Master's Web. Our car is good. Some Delve trinkets are good. Treacherous Transmitter is good. Kind of annoying to play with though. It's like a little bit more effort. There's a bunch of good trinkets. Sim your character. Find out what's best. Embellishments. Ascendance on your weapon. Fantastic. What do I craft? Craft a 200 weapon. All the time. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're rating. Craft a 200 weapon with Ascendance. At Mythic Eye level. Second embellishment. The Nerubian, like, writhing armor band thing that doubles Ascendance. Yeah. Is there anything else? I don't think there's anything else. Shimmer Ice Flows, play what you like. Ice Flows tends to be very good in a lot of situations and is criminally underused by players. But honestly, with this gameplay style, we're barely casting, so even I've started using Shimmer a lot more. Yeah. I think that's about it. I don't think I have anything else. I will do a video next, just kind of like reviewing a VOD, so you guys kind of get to see what's exactly happening, just so you can kind of get a holistic picture and visual representation of the rotation. But yeah, if you have any questions, put in the comments. All the good stuff, subscribe, like. I don't care about that stuff too much. Just if you have questions, join my Discord as well. That's where I'm mostly active. Video guides get outdated very, very quickly. I'm recording this right now on the 27th of September. Tomorrow it could be completely useless. Hopefully not. But yeah, I try to keep written guides when I can. That make sure I make sure they're always up to date. Because it's hard to edit a video, but it's easy to edit a written guide. So yeah, make sure you do that. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next part.